And here we go, the year I've been anxiously waiting for 3 years now. Well, sort of, because it will also be a year with far more work than the previous 3 combined. Now that is a part I'm not anxiously waiting for. Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative in the year 2024. Now I hope you had a great New Year's Eve party, and I know I did because that's why I uploaded this prior to attending it. Anyway, so 2024, this will likely be the most difficult one here at Sofa Central so far, even more difficult than 2021, which involved multiple trips to courthouses, lots of geeky legal work and lots of detective-style work to gather evidence. Now, admittedly, it has also paid off. Some of the officials and politicians against whom we gathered evidence of illegal activity during the pandemic project are now being prosecuted on exactly those grounds. Multiple lower-level officials have had their lives made much harder in 2022 and 2023 as a result of the work done in 2021. So what I'm saying is that I'm not complaining, but still 2021 was a very hard year, and 24 will likely be even more difficult. Multiple countries of interest, including most importantly my own, have scheduled elections, and yes, of course, I will want us to interfere. Unlike 2021, I can't just focus exclusively on my own backyard, but given the fact that my country will have a super election year, I may have to at various points throughout this year. Still, given the recent elevation of the Black Sea region as one of strategic importance for NATO, the elections in my backyard may prove to be of interest and of consequence outside of my backyard as well, which is why throughout 2023 I made some investments that should allow us this year to offer more broad and thorough coverage of the trenches of the election season, hopefully in English as well. I just noticed that it's been over 5 years since I last gave some Romanian partisan politics coverage on this channel, but that's okay. With the recent and looming clown show, it's almost a guarantee that Romanian politics will make international headlines again. So, to keep this structured, let's divide it a little bit. So, 1, failures and wins of 2023, 2, announcement, 3, some conclusions. So, sounds quite simple, but it's not really. So, perhaps the biggest failure of 2023 is that I was unable to finish the Central Asia featured series. And I count that as a failure because at least 50% is my fault. I've been lazy, basically. The other 50% is a combination of life happened, technological failure, and lack of inspiration. On technological failure, I should mention that episodes 9 and 10 were delayed by at least 3 weeks each, if not more. One due to a hard drive failing, which then occupied my time to prevent data loss, and one due to not enough hard drive space combined with a mistake in the delivery, which prolonged the waiting time for a new hard drive. Still, it's not an immense tragedy, as there is no rule that says everything must be published ASAP. After all, you don't expect on TV to see documentaries having 0-day footage either. Of course, it's also a bit annoying because instead of getting right away to preparing clips about Laos and Cambodia, I'm still stuck to writing scripts on Kyrgyzstan. But such is life. As always, everything will be delivered eventually. There are also, of course, some smaller failures, mostly of no consequence over the long term, but excessively bothersome over the short run. Most recently, I would count here just how complicated it was to get this camera to work for live streams. Now, it worked eventually, but not in time to videotape the clip with Roman with it, making that day far more stressful than it should have been. or the fact that I left Laos one day before their national holiday. The initial plan was to get into Cambodia right after their national holiday, but to be in neighboring Laos for the Laotian national holiday. And because of lack of attention on my part, I booked a flight on December the 1st instead of December the 3rd. And I noticed that when it was way too late and it would have been too expensive to change it. Again, not of significant consequence since I got the type of footage that I needed without having been to the national holiday and with other occasions around it, but still quite frustrating. Also, on delays, there are a few tickets in the internal system that I wanted to fulfill by the end of 2023. Some of them have been waiting since 2021 or even earlier. But various on-the-fly snap decisions by me or various events prevented that from happening. Like, for instance, I have a video that's supposed to be in English on Ceausescu's palace and house that stands at about 80% ready since August. But then came the Ukraine trip later in that August, and then the Southeast Asia trip alongside with other obligations. One thing led to another, and I still haven't finished it. Amazing. And since I mentioned the internal system, well, with all of the problems that it brought, getting this internal ticketing system up and running in January 2023 is one of the big wins. It not only helped me put some order into my increasingly chaotic and busy workflow, but also helped several other people in ways that I couldn't have possibly predicted. As such, I want to expand its use for 2024, but more on that later. Another big win for 2023 is that I managed to do the Southeast Asia tour with overall far less expenses than the worst case scenario. This hasn't happened since 2016 when I did the first Ukrainian tour, with the consideration that in 2016 the purposes and therefore the expenses of this operation were far more modest. So being able to immediately start planning the 24 tour with already about 20% of the funding secured without having to subsidize or nag anyone is, in my book, quite a win. But as correctly someone pointed out in the donor circle, this should be expected for someone so experienced in taking such expeditions. Now, I don't know if the esteemed donor wanted to flatter me or wanted to increase pressure to make sure I plan things even better next time around, but I'll choose to take it as a compliment. Also a big win for 23 all in all is that I finally got a new camera that is also one step forward in production, technologically speaking. Its ability to accept my lavalier, thus sparing me of using external recorders, will over time reduce the time required for making every new video and also potentially reduce the expenses on batteries. I say potentially because I still need a separate recorder for interviews, for the weekend podcast, and I still haven't looked into how much it costs to get an extra battery for this one, as I intend to use it in the field too. Now, someone pointed out to me that its mechanics may suck, or at least sucked with his exemplar, which broke down relatively quickly. Well, the good news is that I usually know how to fix these things. It's how I prolonged the life of the previous one to much more than the manufacturer thought it is possible. But until bad things happen, it's a win that an element on the wish list since 2019 has finally been fulfilled towards the end of 2023. Now, speaking of the wish list, I will have to change it because gradually all of it has been fulfilled, at least in spirit, but that's for another day. Another win of 2023 can also be considered the fact that we managed to contain the drama. As you all know, I don't subscribe to the school of thought that dynamism is inherently good, not when it comes to organizations that aim to improve knowledge, wisdom, and political influence. And while drama increases dynamism, and yes, sometimes something good can come out of it, more often than not, drama is a drag on activity and, in extreme cases, a threat to cohesion. Not to mention a huge headache. So I take it as a win that we had none of that in 2023. Another big win, in my opinion, is the increased professionalization and stabilization of the news feed. Now, by the way, if you're not in the news feed, you're missing out. It's free on Telegram, and it's basically a 24/7 news service on geopolitics, but also national politics. Of course, the Intermarium region gets priority, but a quick glance daily over our news feed will, for sure, keep you well informed on global politics as well. In 2023, the feed became much more polished and professional enough that it is now used as a go-to source by multiple news outlets in 4 countries of Europe. Now that is no small thing. There are newsrooms with far more people and definitely far bigger budgets than this operation, whose writers have it as a duty to also be versed into our newsfeed. And for this, I have a lot of gratitude to extend to the news team. Of course, I contribute to the feed as well, but the vast majority of the contributions are not mine, but the result of several people taking a few minutes a day to curate news and make sure the best available links are available to everyone of our persuasion to then use in debates or to improve their knowledge or for anything else. Now, I know that some members of the newsroom don't think their work is really that serious, but guys, let me tell you this. You're kicking asses of self-styled journalists with 15 years of experience or more when it comes to news gathering. One reason is because every media that has news needs 1 or 2 news feeds for themselves. In the past, agencies like the Associated Press or Thomson Reuters would fill that role via their news telegrams. Now, with an increasingly democratized information space, the old ones aren't cutting it anymore. And this is where news feeds like ours come into place, where one gets the news from 3 to 5 different sources with more interpretations and thus with an increased chance of understanding not just where propaganda comes from, but how it is modeled as well. So yeah, if you're not in the news feed, you're missing out. Now, I could list some other small things, just like with failures, but it would then turn into bragging, and that's not something I seek, not now anyway. All right, now, some announcements. Number 1, given that the internal system served us well, I shall gradually expand its use. Now, I'm still conflicted on public use due to, in part, fear of spam, and in part due to the fact that I should be balancing the desire to expand with the needs and interests of the network. Not to mention the wants of the donor circle. As I've been saying since 2015, and I haven't changed my mind, not all opinions are created equal. Where an opinion originates from also matters, with the exception of the Oxford Debate Society, at least in theory. But no, seriously, there have been instances in the last 2 years when I wanted something and the donor circle told me no. And it matters where it involves spending more of the donor's money. I take that opinion a lot more seriously than the free of charge advice of random people on the internet who sure know a lot better how to manage a community. Now, in this case, it doesn't involve more expenses necessarily, but it does involve sharing of some information that until now was only for the donor circle. Mostly information about upcoming projects, expenses, obviously, and other miscellaneous stuff. So, January is usually the month in which I make technological and procedural changes, so throughout this month we'll experiment the degree to which the use of the internal system will be widened. Of course, it will depend on the feedback from the community as well. Because while the internal system helped me and a handful of people who've been using it, that may not be the case more widely throughout the collection of spaces that we've come to know as the Freedom Alternative Network. Now, one thing is certain. With the help of this system, now I can also present some statistics. So, in 2023, I resolved 112 tasks, cancelled 1, and failed at 2. So, almost a task every 3 days. Not every task is a video, of course, but every task is related to SOFA activities. Now, hopefully in 2024, I get better at writing down stuff. This way I can then refer back internally to things tried before. And probably improve the statistic as well, given how complicated this year is likely to be. We'll see what happens, but the strategic change is towards more openness. Slowly, as with everything else on the sofa, because doing things slowly so far on these things, we turned out to be mostly correct, so there's that. Number 2. Now, this is a technical announcement concerning the weekend podcast in Romania. And several months ago, exasperated by YouTube's random warnings and flags, but also due to increased lopsidedness in funding, we moved the podcast partially behind a primitive version of a paywall. Now, primitive is one way of putting it, relatively permissible is another way, in the sense that the password has been shared around and, if anyone was determined enough could get around it. Well, as of right now, I just reset the password. The new password will be available on the usual channels at the time of the new episode, and as always, those in various corner cases are invited to contact me. Also, another change in this regard, the torrent files with the podcast will also be available in the internal system. This is to cover all those who don't use Telegram and various other corner cases that appeared during the last 6 months. One thing is certain though, I'm not renouncing the paywall for that show. The cost of producing it has continued to increase with inflation and other taxes, and the main policy objectives for introducing it have been achieved. One was to decrease the financial pressure on top donors. At some point, about 70% of the cost to produce the show was covered by 9 people. 10 if I include myself. That's 0.1% or less of the people benefiting from it. Such a situation was unsustainable, not just financially, but morally. And as you all know, when you rely on a handful of supporters, trouble is not far away. The other objective was to make the podcast censorship-proof, and on that front, there simply is no question that distribution via torrent files from our servers is far more resilient than YouTube. Yes, it may be inconvenient, but when was the last time we stood for convenience here? Convenience is the altar on which too many are sacrificing their liberties, so we're not going to prioritize that here. Everything in moderation. Number 3. The next attempt at a tour will be in Colombia and Ecuador. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, I wanted Ethiopia or Iraq, but unfortunately, life happened. The security situation deteriorated quite significantly in Iraq over the last 5 months, and it's doubtful that it will improve throughout this year. And in Ethiopia, the security situation is slowly improving, but not fast enough. So I can't risk scheduling a trip there, organize the fundraiser, and then wake up in the situation of me not being able to get there. So I moved slightly further down the priority list. Now, with the election of Javier Milei, who immediately went on to crack down on leftists and their supporters, and the very likely re-election of Nayib Bukele as president of El Salvador, the politics of Latin America are rapidly changing, not always for the better, but consistently in the right direction, at least in my opinion. So I think it is an appropriate time for an incursion in the region. Now, El Salvador alone is difficult to visit and would not justify the costs, especially not the cost of a long-haul flight. So I picked the 2 other countries whose politics have been strongly influenced by Nayib Bukele, both directly and indirectly, something which should at this point be called the Bukele effect, which I'm going to talk about in the next several months. The presidential snap elections in Ecuador brought a president who only entered politics in 2021, kind of like Javier Milei. And increasingly, nearly all political forces are slowly starting to sound like Bukele on the law and order issue and like Javier Milei on economics, whether they like it or not. By the way, the official currency in Ecuador is the US dollar, a policy that is wanted by Milei administration for Argentina as well. Of course, the usual suspects called it a radical policy, but Ecuador has been doing just fine using the US dollar for 24 years already. Meanwhile, in Colombia, the old Marxist guerrillas are no more, and now some of its members are accessible to talk to. They may not be accessible to talk to in front of a camera, though I will for sure try that too, but I think I can bring quite a bit of valuable information and stories from there. Of course, I will explain more of that later this year when I'll have the plan fully ironed out and will present it to you to vote for it with your wallet. So there's that. Number 4. In 2024, I shall take several trips that are for my personal interest. And just like in the previous years, some of these will intersect with the needs of this channel. One of those will be the one in August, when I'll be in Budapest for about a week. So if anyone from the area wants to have a chat, from now to June would be a good time to say so. If the schedule gets too crowded, this leaves me room to simply increase my stay in Hungary. My business there is 6 days tops, but I haven't yet scheduled anything else in August, so it would be no problem to just add more days. Also, part of that will be me attending to the International Conference on Men's Issues, which finally comes to my backyard, and I don't have to fly thousands of kilometers or bear with the crap that is online talk. By the way, you should check the conference too. Lots of nice people will be there, including from politics. Links will be in the description on how to get there and how much it costs. I'm not the organizer, but yes, I do fully endorse it. I can't promise now, but I will also try to bring in videos from that conference too. I'll try to bring in new stuff from another neighbor of Romania as well, a neighbor that is not Ukraine. We'll see what happens. Speaking of Ukraine, while I know I will be in the country again this year, at least twice, I still don't know at this moment if I'll have a camera with me or not. But if I will, you will be among the first to know. All right. Number 5. Last year, we increased the donor circle entry threshold due to rampant inflation. This will not happen this year. The bare minimum necessities should be coverable with current projected income stream. Should-ish, hopefully. And finally, number 6, the 3rd season of Propaganda Basement ends on February the 29th. The last 2 episodes on February the 22nd and the 29th are in English and will be, of course, on this channel. Friendly reminder, the whole season is available in the donor circle. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And while I'm at it, I think this is also the place to also confirm that there will be a 4th season, and the 4th season will be half in English, if not more than half. And of course it will be on Asian propaganda, since I brought a lot of it with me from Laos and Cambodia, at least 25 kilos of propaganda to be more precise. Alrighty, so some conclusions. The main one is that there's a lot of work to be done this year, and as usual, I try to keep the January 1st videos with fewer promises rather than more, because look what happens when I promise more. Shit happens and the schedule gets derailed, so it's better to promise less and deliver pleasant surprises. I made mistakes in 2023, and I'm sure I'll make a few more this year as well. For only those who do nothing make no mistakes. But the hope is for the mistakes to be of little consequence. Because again, after all these years, this is still a hobby. I'm very grateful to the people helping me with certain tasks. A shout out to Mr. R, who has been tirelessly making these cute thumbnails for me for years now. And a shout out to the Discord management team, which have been keeping things mostly clean for years too, without requiring too much work from me. But with all of that being said, I still do most of the work. I'm not complaining, but I am stating it because if there's one lesson I've learned the hard way over the years is this: you can't scale up creativity. You can either drop the quality to increase output, which is the preferred method these days, or turn it into a for-profit enterprise, which involves bank loans and other forms of external control, or gradually increase quality, even if that sometimes sacrifices output, which is the path I took. It's why I script most of the videos. I want to be able to share them years from now and not be ashamed of the content. So yeah, that's pretty much it for now. Happy New Year, everyone, and I will see you all soon on the Freedom Alternative. Cheers!